I think if you don't mind, we can start just with some check-in.
Sure. Yeah.
All right, so we have, thank you for joining us. We have a few more people. I can see some people are joining us again, and that makes my heart happy. Thank you. Is there anything that while we are waiting to see if a couple more people joining us, is there anything related to past two sessions that you like to bring up, to bring any comments, concerns, questions that we can discuss for a couple minutes while we are waiting?
I was away and missed last session, so I'm looking forward to the recorded of last week's.
Thank you. Yeah, I will be ready. Thank you. Anybody had any chance to look at the practices or do the practices, or even if while you are writing, like paying attention to the emotions come up or how your body reacts to it? Any such experience?
Well, I don't know if you saw Catherine's comment in the chat, but she says, glad to be here to listen. I'm in listen only mode at work. I haven't written anything yet.
Thanks, Catherine. Thanks. I understand and I appreciate joining us from work. Thank you.
I'm doing the same thing actually, but I did get a chance to write a list of branching points.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the next thing I would do is establish a structure before sequence, and maybe you can speak to that at some point today.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I will try to see if we have time, but that's a part of also next week too.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Super. Okay.
Yeah. But let's see if hopefully we have time to that, but thanks for bringing it up. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. We have Sarah and Juan, Yvonne, Catherine, Craig, and Theodore. That's fascinating. That's wonderful. Thank you.
So Shabnam, I didn't get a chance to start writing, but it was interesting that I'm taking these seminars because I do want to capture. I started out with the thought and idea that I would capture my family's immigration history and my own history and growing up in the United States, mainly as a memoir for my grandkids, and a lot gets lost as generations go by.
Yes.
And I read while I was thinking about how to start this. I have an outline that I put together a couple of years back. I'm about to retire, so this is I'm going to start back on that outline. But I read a recent article that was written in the Atlantic by a gentleman who began the article by, I didn't start out writing this article with this thought in mind, and what I'm coming reading that article came to the realization that it's important to start, and then as you dive into it, you may discover that what you intended to accomplish isn't necessarily what you want to do. And I thought that was an important learning moment for me as I begin to think how to structure what I'm going to put down on paper, and whether it gets published or not at this point doesn't really matter to me as much as what I'm passing on to the next generation.
Yeah, wow, I have goosebumps. That's beautiful. Thanks for sharing. And yes, when we start writing, it does its own magic. It takes us to places that we didn't know we could go. words, sentences, emotions, they just come out when we start writing. It's just, I think, the magic of writing. And yeah, that's true. It's a journey. It's basically, we don't know everything about it when we start, but we build that journey step by step as we go, as we write, as we, Adrian used a very beautiful term for writing memoir, self-reflection. You know, when we are writing the story of our lives, we are constantly self-reflecting. So it's getting to know ourselves better and allowing other generations after us to get to know us also and learn from what we've gone through. You know, we have a lot to tell them. Every generation owes the next generation to tell their stories. It's been about 20 years, maybe 20, 30 years, that memoir writing is now a popular thing. And I really appreciate it, because before that, I mean, even for many families to this day, keeping secrets is something that, you know, it's been just the style of life. And then you have this, like in the newer generation, you see some anomalies in the behavior of kids that is like passed through generations, but we don't know where it comes from. As if, like if you want to adopt a kid, they always tell you, well, you don't know anything about the history. But, well, I don't know much about the history of my own parents and grandparents, as if they adopted me. I don't know what they've done, because it's always a secret. So the term that they call it, we are going to air the dirty laundry. I think it is going to be now a positive term, a positive thing, because there is no shame in what has been happened. It's the pain that we need to share, or it's the lessons learned. It's the strengths that we want to share and to show the next generation, or even us, us together. Like when I read other people's memoirs my age, I learn a lot from it. I feel I'm not alone. Yeah, wow, thank you for bringing that up.
There's a couple more comments in the chat box. Fanta says it's her first time. And then Catherine goes on to say, I think I haven't written in part because I know there will be intense emotions. Just thinking about it starts to bring them up.
I totally understand that, Catherine. Fanta, thanks for joining us. And Larissa, I see hi. Catherine, it is very important. We do emphasize on the intense emotions that come up. And I highly recommend to have someone safe, or, even going through having, like, considering therapy or coaching, to have someone safe that you can process the emotions, or a safe writing group. And make sure that, like, if you write it, even if you start writing it, what would be the best way? Is it like just starting with taking notes, just imagining a little bit, even recording your voice? Or when you write about even 10 minutes, just check in, just make sure that how you feel, to make sure that it doesn't become a trauma on the top of another old trauma. We want to process it. It's very important, and thanks for sharing that. All right, I'm going to share my screen. We are going to extensively talk about characters and character building today. It's not the right, hold on. Yeah, here. So I need to remember how, yep, okay. So we want to talk about characters, a very, very important part of our stories. We have, including ourselves in a memoir, so many different characters that they dealt with each other in so many different ways. How do we want to look at them? How do we want to introduce each character? The difference between the fiction and nonfiction is here we have the character. It's our responsibility to introduce the character and build that character, develop that character in a way that it shows every realistic aspect of that character's being. And I say more when we get to different details and slides about it. We want to see how we want to evaluate a character rather than judging them. Each character has its uniqueness, and then we want to know the character, and then we also want to see how the character changed over time so that the character develops. Each character definitely has a strengths and flaws, how we want to look at them. And then I came to kind of like introducing the literary archetypes. If you are familiar with Carl Jung, who is basically a psychologist, or was a psychologist, but the archetypes that he introduced as part of our psyche, part of human psyche, they are now being used in so many different literary screenwriting, memoir writing, fiction writing, and we'll get to it. Of course, these are all like very summary of everything. It's just like scratching the tip of the iceberg. I do want to talk about a couple of personality tests to get to know yourself better, and then we will talk about a little bit more of emotional support, which is a very important piece of memoir writing. It's just like we need to take it serious because there are so much emotion repressed that would come out. Do we want to flood it out and burden ourselves again, or do we want to slowly bring it out and look at it and embrace it and accept ourselves and our different version of ourselves that was hurt but became stronger? So that's what we're going to talk about. Characters. Who likes Shrek? Right. So I just liked to choose him because to us, he has a lot of strengths and a lot of flaws. So that was interesting. You know, he has his own uniqueness, and over the time of the different series of the video of the movie, he also developed a lot. That was very interesting. And that's why there is no good or bad. You know, if you want to look at, let's say, like my father in my memoir, if you want to look at him from one aspect, it's like a person who is alcoholic and abusive. But then in the other side, he's also a person who fights with his own, you know, with every like deepest breath and blood that he has for humans, right? Or he really wanted to support my daughter or myself. You know, there are so many different things in one character. And there is, of course, an overall to it, but each character deserves to be introduced from all different aspects. And then I want to make sure that we also understand that not only each character gets influence from the dynamic of the environment, each character also impacts the dynamic of the environment. Let's say like it's a new family and there is a newborn. We would think that the newborn is just being absorbed, like absorbing everything from the dynamic of the environment, but the newborn also having her or his own rules for the parents to change the environment, the dynamic. So we want to make sure that we see both sides of these changes that a character impacts. When we write an event or when we write a few pages, then we want to think about it. We want to contemplate to see how was it? How, like I, as the protagonist of the memoir, how did I change the environment? You know, because let's say like me, the only child, of course, as helpless as I felt in my childhood, I also had demands as a child that my parents had to think about, put pressure on them. Whether how they responded to it is different, but I also impacted the dynamic, if that makes sense. So we want to make sure that, like I said, we don't want to judge a character, including ourselves. One of the most important part of the memoir writing is we get to see older versions of ourselves and we get to accept it. That's self-acceptance. That is the biggest part of a spiritual journey, the biggest part of that liberation and inner peace that we want to have. As long as we have pieces of ourselves that we don't like, that we want to be disconnected from, that brings conflict in us. And that's also with other people. When I don't know if I mentioned it or not, when my mom first read, especially a piece of the memoir that I wrote about hair punishing me when I was a teenager, she said, "Oh, you made a monster of me." And then we talked about it. We said, I didn't say, "No, you weren't," but I said, "You were under pressure of the society. You were under the pressure of a bad marriage. And you were raised as a woman who didn't know she has rights to stand up for herself or for her daughter. So I accept you with that. I don't blame you, or I don't know, maybe I blame her, but I don't judge you. I don't judge you for that, because that was the situation." It helped her to take responsibility for what she did, or including myself. If I was a people pleaser, and as a people pleaser, because I felt helpless, I manipulated my ex-husband to the point that I wanted to change him, and then he wanted to change me. So it's kind of like this pull and push that we have on each other. So we don't want to judge, but we want to see what was impacting the character's behavior. But we do want to evaluate. Evaluation is the appearance of a character. You want to make sure that you introduce the appearance of a character. We don't want to kind of say "Oh, he was very tall," but we can't say the roof, the ceiling was so short that his 6 foot tall he had to bend and pass the door, things like that. We can bring it very artistically with literary tools, but we want to make sure that the reader knows that my character was tall and skinny maybe, or tall and big, or what type of clothes. If I want to explain about the clothes that my mother wore during the 70s before the revolution of Iran, it was very different. It was the fastest and latest fashion of the West in Iran that women were wearing. And then the revolution happened and women had to put scarf on them. So I have to say what type of clothes they were wearing to show even the society. Fashion by itself plays a role. Or what was the character's relationship with other people? How was the behavior of the character? When I was a kid, lying was my thing. I wouldn't talk. Communication wasn't a matter because I didn't know how to communicate. I just wanted to hide everything. Even through my first marriage, I lied because I didn't have the courage and the environment to be able to talk. So I was hiding, I was lying. But then I kind of started learning my communication skills changed to, I want to talk, but the talking wasn't a talking it was like a type of talking that I was just pointing at him. It wasn't a type of talking that, okay, let's sit and talk, but then he was giving me the silence treatment. It was like the dynamic. So you would say that like I was communicating with talking, but what type of talking? Which we talk next week in dialogues and scenes. How do we introduce our character with the type of phrases that they use, with the tone of voice that they use? And of course, it's important for the reader or for us who is writing the memoir to know what was the character's goals, what was the values that he or she wanted to pursue in her life. Like as a kid, as a teenager, the biggest value for me was freedom. But I was a rebel because I was under dictatorship. I was under a rigid structure. So we can see the value was a good value, but how I wanted to get it, what were the stakes for me towards that was like, it's like giving a different shade or light to that value that the protagonist or the character is following. So any questions, any comments so far about what do you think about characters? How do you feel about your character or your own self in your memoir? Hopefully you're absorbing it and I'm not talking too much. So when we look at a, let's say like the woods, we see a lot of trees. When we look at a little bit more with curiosity, we see the trees are all different, right? Like even in the back of our houses, we have exactly the same trees, but when you look at them, you see the differences between even the same type of the trees that we have in the backyard. One grows slower, one is taller, even though they are the same age, or even the colors of the leaves are a little different. So even though we are all human, even though we would say all these Middle Eastern women or all these Caucasian women or all, each one of us is unique.
Oh, Shabnam?
Yes.
Anne put in the chat box, please repeat the question. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Anne, she was referring to the question that you asked at the end of the last slide.
Oh, sure. I was asking if you have any questions or comments about what we talked, and if you have anything you want to talk about the characters that you have in your mind, including yourself, if it's your memoir. Do you like to have any comments?
I guess it's for me, it's when I reflect back, I've written some things about when I was young, and then I get kind of frustrated at how flat the character seems, and I want to kind of make the character more three-dimensional. And I don't know to what extent I'm successful though, because sometimes when I initially read it, it feels kind of flat, and maybe some of the techniques you can go over and illustrate might be a good way. Like I understand the use of like adjectives or like the doorway, somebody being tall or big, and in the context of the environment, right? That helps, and also the dialogue. I guess I just need to sit there and write. It's probably what I need.
I was going to say, yeah, actually, yeah, that is a very good part of the answer, because the more you write about the character, the more you see them. But things like we talked about, like if I go back, like the impacts that the character has on the dynamic, and the impact that the dynamic has on the character. Or here we talk about the goals of the character. How does she plan things? How does she stand up for her right? How does she not stand up for her right? Those are things that, through the events that you are writing, you show how the character unfolds. you build the character, it's like you introduce the character, but then over time you build it up. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Sure, and I hope the more we go through the slides, it helps you more about we were on the uniqueness, about like how we can build that character, how we can bring more different aspects of the character to it. Like a character, let's say like a mother who loves her daughter. In one event, you show how she can sacrifice for the daughter, but in the other event, in another scene, you can show another part of her that is so tired that she wants to get away. She wants to leave the kid and get away. It's like the conflicts that the character has. We want to bring them out. We want the character to be authentic with all different emotions that she experiences. That brings the character out of that flatness. And I hope the rest of the slides help a little bit more, but we can definitely talk more about it. So the uniqueness, every one of us is unique, and also every one of us is even more unique to the eye of our loved one. We do say that parents are like impartial to their kids, but then there are also some personality connection between parents and one kid versus the other one that brings a little bit more smoother communication. So that makes a different uniqueness for each child, and that brings pressures or strengths for one, or like a little bit more smooth environment for the other one. But what we want to show is how that uniqueness play in the role of communication with other characters. How can we show that uniqueness? There was like a very, very simple thing I read in a book. The character, the protagonist always had her hair braided in a special way, that like she had them braided in both ways. I'm not saying it exactly like the author said. And this was like for half of the book, and it came up again and again. So I could see the protagonist. I could see the character. Every time I thought about her, the braids were with her. And then when she immigrated to the United States and got married, then she let the hair out. So it was like, to me, it was like showing that like that was her part of her uniqueness. Now this is her part of the uniqueness, and that also the change. I hope the example makes sense, but that's our responsibility to find those uniqueness in each characters, because each one of them who are in our life stories are unique to us in a different way that they are unique to another person. We want to the character, the way that my mother talks to me is very different than the way that she talks to her friend. So if my mother is one character in my memoir, she might seem a lot more needy to me, but a lot more helpful to her friend. So we want to see that, that uniqueness to me versus that uniqueness for her friend. These are the things, these are the differences, or how does each character face a challenge, depends on the circumstances. And each one of us react or respond uniquely to each challenge, depends on the circumstances. So these are like important. There are behavioral habits, like you would get to know that my father as a character in my memoir would blow out like everything because he would get mad quickly for little reasons. Those are the trends, the patterns. But then in such like a special moment, he could be very soft. He could be not even facing that challenge, depends on the challenge. So we want to see all those differences when a character like acts differently or has a special moment. Any questions so far? Okay, so from the beginning of the story to the end of the story, one of the biggest jobs we have as writers is to show that a character changes. No matter what, we live, we change because we learn every day. It could be little, it could be big. Who knows how to measure it, but we change. And we want to show that change because a character who is very tough and doesn't know how to communicate could have a huge aha moment as soon as you put his son into his arms. And that's like a huge change, maybe a wake-up call. Or a character who is shot and has a, huge wake-up call. Or my father probably had a huge wake-up call when I got divorced when I was 23. So it's like, how do we develop how each event make the change in us? How does it make us different, in a way stronger? And how do we deal with our flaws and strengths in each one of these events? But that's what when we say the memoir, the story, when you write it, it should move. It shouldn't be flat because there is constant change in it. The environment is changing, the character is changing, the character is learning, constantly learning different things. And then there are also some aspects of characters that, let's say, like some people change over time, and we can show that the fears that were so big for them in the beginning started to shrink, and the fear is not dominant anymore, even if it's there. The fear is not so powerful anymore. But there are also characters that they just live with the fear. The fear is always so powerful, even though they try in their own ways, but the fear remains so powerful and like a big shadow on their life. Like as one character, a friend of mine was talking to me about her memoir. There is this very close friend of her husband, and they have like 3 kids. Her husband has announced that he has an open relationship and she's not allowed to have an open relationship. But she cannot get divorced because of the fear of what's going to happen to me, what's going to happen to my kids. So she's allowing that big shadow of the fear just to lead her life, unfortunately. So we have to see all these different things, different characters. But in that same character, you can see a lot of other things as a mother. You can see a lot of other things as a creative engineer, actually. You see how different we are, and how in one aspect of our life, we allow the fear to dominate us, and then we catch it in other aspects of our lives, sometimes in a major aspect of our life. And then even like little fears, like if I'm a character in this story, I'm still very, very scared of going and like camping out and staying in the woods at night. I know it's a fear, but I'm just allowing it to dominate me, and I'm not changing it. I don't have the courage yet. So there are, I mean, that's a silly one, right? But there are fears that we have to see in ourselves, that we allow them to have power over us. And there are fears that we work on and we take power over them. Those are the changes that we want to show in a character. As far as personality traits, like someone might be very nosy. And in so many different ways, like that, being nosy and gossipy could be like an unpleasant characteristic. However, if there is a chaos and you need information, that nosy, gossipy character could actually come to help, and you can like say how he went and gathered information through his own tools and brought it back, and the information helped for a decision making. So that's where we say, do we want to say strengths and flaws, or do we want to say they might be pleasant or unpleasant? Depends on the circumstances. I have a feeling that it's pretty heavy. Do we need to take a breath or think about it, or any comments? Don't be shy. Say how you feel at least. No?
I'll make a comment. I think it will be challenging navigating the descriptions that one provides of the different characters. And I think the difficulty will be in checking yourself for accuracy about what you describe. And again, a lot, especially with characters that are no longer living, it's about our perception, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'll be a difficult challenge.
Definitely, especially for the ones who are no longer with us. And and basically what you're saying is we need to dig down. We need to make sure that we don't go with the face value. We don't just see them as an angry person. Why was he angry? What was the pressure on him? That's where we can actually bring the society's or cultural elements into our story. That how did that impact this character? If I always saw him as an angry person, what was the fear behind it? A little bit of digging down, and maybe we don't get to that accurate, or it's as accurate as we can see, but we can definitely deepen our perception to see what was behind it, what was the pressure on that person.
Oh, another comment like Juan. I think that these questions are so good to have to develop the character. So like when you start writing about a character, you're not necessarily thinking about the nuances of the questions in the questions. Mm-hmm. So I think that these having access to the slides like we did before will be really good to develop our characters. And the other thing I was thinking about is whether when I was reading through the slides and listening to you, I was thinking, okay, is the character that I'm going to develop? I could see myself developing the character of myself as the protagonist, mm-hmm. and being able to respond to some of those questions more so than if I was writing about, say, an ancestor or or even somebody still living in my family. For example, I have a sister who's going through a lot of illness, and and a mother is going through dementia. So it's like all of those could be characters too.
Right.
But like Juan said, it's so hard to be able to cover the, you want to do a lot of, I guess, reflection to see if maybe get some feedback from family members, if it's a family member, to see if maybe it's sounding to be true. So yeah, it's a pretty intense task to develop characters. I can see with all these slides.
It is. I think the whole goal of it is to know the character in a very deeper way. And then, like someone who would give us, yes, and I'm just going to finish it. Someone who would give us like a cold shoulder, and we would get mad at that character. We want to just not only see the cold shoulder, we want to see why he did that. What happened, that's the backstory, that if we have, or if we can get access to it, that like that person who has maybe like the ignorant attachment, or the avoidant attachment, and wants to avoid anything in order to communicate what happened in his childhood, what happened in his youth. It's like a little bit of the backstory, but then we choose to how much of that we want to reveal, or it's just like at least a hint, but we just want to show our understanding, empathy, and passion for that character. Depends on how much detail we have or we can get. We can bring all these backstories to the story, but we want to make sure that our story is written with empathy and compassion.
Right. Well said.
But not to minimize people's bad behavior or hurtful behavior. But everybody who has a hurtful behavior, there is a challenge that he or she is dealing with. We want to kind of like see the behind the connections. That's what I mean by empathy and compassion. Yes, Anne, please.
I was just thinking that.
Oh, we lost you. You are on mute again.
Oh, I was thinking, isn't it kind of fraught to share your work with people whose characters you've developed in the story? Like, I always wonder at what point should you do that? Because I'm just afraid if I share some of my, like, I'll share an example. I wrote a little bit, and then I shared it with, I have 3 sisters, and I wrote about them and our experience with our mom. It's a little bit similar to what you want to do, Juan. I want to capture my immigrant experience, immigrating here as a child, and I'd like to pass it on to my children, nieces and nephews. And one of my sisters who saw what I wrote got really, really angry. And so I wondered, but she would have been angry if I showed it 3 months before then. She would have been angry if I showed it, later. I mean, it's just, there was going to be a reaction because we all have our own stories and how things happened and our interpretation of them. And people are not going to agree. So I think you have to be comfortable with dealing with it at some point, at some level. And I was curious about how you deal with that.
Yeah, that's actually, that is a very sensitive subject. And thank you for bringing it up, because I want to say, if it is something related to me, then I choose the liberty of, do I want to talk about it or not? And obviously that's from my point of view. I don't know if this example is related or not, but like as a child, I remembered that my uncle, my mother's brother, came to our house. At the time he was wealthy, and my father didn't have a lot of money. And then he kind of like cleaned his shoes with our rug and showing kind of like, or saying that these rugs that, especially we are Persian, so Persian rugs are important in our houses, and kind of like telling my father that these rugs that you have no value, you don't have money or prestige, humiliating my father. I remember it like that. My father remembers a very more exaggerated version of it. And then my mother remembers it totally different, that like, oh no, he didn't say that. So I went with my version, the version that I remembered, although I was a kid. And my uncle read it and he said, oh, well, this is not what I expected. You know, in a way, if it was related to me, I would like to take the liberty of what I want to reveal. But at the same time, yes, it will bring reactions. Sometimes it's a burst of reaction, and then it's an opportunity for communication and growing together and bringing it closer together. And sometimes we might want to even choose that we're not going to talk to that person anymore. There's one thing in my second memoir, I'm writing it, and it's about my ex-husband. And I'm kind of like feeling, if I don't write that piece about him, it just makes a huge stake that I dealt with out of the story. And if I write it, then it is his secret. What do I want to do? I'm still thinking about it. I think at the end of the day, I have a feeling that I will choose to kind of like saying it, maybe with a different language. But also, I am no longer talking to him. And I choose not to talk to him anymore. It sounds like it's the ethics of it, and it's also the boundaries that we create for ourselves, if that makes sense. It's like a polarity. It's not a yes or no, a black or white answer. It's a polarity that we want to kind of like bring to a balance. That like, what do we expect of it to be the result? Or how much do I want to reveal, or what do I choose for this relationship in the future? If that, it's a very difficult situation, but I don't know if it makes sense what I said.
So you kind of have to pick and choose your battles, I guess. That's what you mean.
Yeah. It depends on the character, right? Yes.
I'm kind of curious how Anne's other sisters, did they have reactions that were quite like Shabnam is talking about the different perspectives that we have about how we experience how we experience life's events, and how we give out some summaries of, maybe we summarizing, and there's going to be a difference of opinions. I'm just kind of curious, Anne, if you wanted to share about.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share my, so we were taking care of our mother who was ill. She had cancer, and she was living with me for a while, and we kind of had a little minor explosion. So we placed her with another sister for a while, and then she ended up moving down south to Atlanta. Just, costs, assisted living costs, that was a factor.
Right.
And so I wrote about that from my perspective and my experience. And she felt like we thrust mom on her. And so, and my other two sisters didn't really see it that way.
Right.
We
That's
felt
what
like
I kind of thought. Yeah.
Yeah, she kind of volunteered because it was there was a facility not far from her house. So I mean, these are real family dynamics that we all live through, and there's bound to be differences, right? And I was caught off guard and very surprised by her reaction, because that's not how I recollected. But the way she, what she was upset about was sort of that around that time, the emotions, the stress, and all of that. And I think it's realistic to think about how I think it was a constructive interaction, because we had no idea. The rest of the sisters had no idea she felt like this about it. But I think when you write from your perspective is always going to be different than somebody else's perspective. And to, be wary, be guarded to a certain extent. I would say that it's important to be guarded about how you want to say it, to be faithful to your own truth, I guess, is what I want to say.
Yeah, but also I can see this, as you are saying, it's a good it created a good opportunity, not only to know about her emotions, also maybe like even a conversation, a communication that you wouldn't even have if you wouldn't written this, I just feel like, would this be, like you mentioned, that it was constructive, and would this be a chance for you to talk about it, to hear about her emotions, and then go back and see how you would edit your own writing with the new information that you have. And like you said, making sure that what you see as the truth, you keep it, but what are different shades that could, like different shades of emotion that could be added to it, that compassion, that empathy towards her, that like shows you deepened that understanding of the situation.
And that would be referred to kind of like backstory, I think, and of that particular character in the story. If that sister, there's probably backstory to her, the way she reacted.
Exactly.
Possibly.
Exactly.
Oh, sure. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Even the differences between her relationship with your mom and the other sisters and you. In the
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
Yeah. Like maybe even like there are resentments from the past that she needs to bring out.
Let me share something that because I'll put in the chat box a few minutes ago. What I hear Shabnam say is to share your built characters with the people in your lives, to borrow the language of 12 steps, except when to do so would injure them or others.
Ah, yes, that's beautiful. Is that Catherine?
That was good.
Oh,
So,
yes. Oh, thanks, Ghazal June. Thank you. That's beautiful. Yes. Ooh, we have 5 minutes and I still have a few more slides.
it's okay if we go a little over.
I hope it's okay. Yeah, thank you. Why doesn't it work? Come on. These slides are a little bit like I can go over them with a little bit faster speed, but like we talked about it, the strengths, and then the next slide, flaws. Well, of course, yeah, we want to see, if you look at each character, including yourself, you have it. You have all of it. It might be little or a lot. It might come up in an event like with an exaggeration and like a kind of like a explosion, or it could be very different, like for you to show it. But we have it all. Everybody has it. It depends like which one is dominated. But we also develop more of these traits, of these strengths over the course of life. It's like the natural process of life. Now, a lot of people still like stay unprivileged, that they might not be able to develop them as much, but it is in them. That's also important, that a character, my aunt just passed away last week. And the saddest part for me was how difficult her life was. He never had a chance to be creative or curious or open-minded. If he had the chance, he could develop it and bring it out. But the dynamic of life didn't allow her to develop and bring them out. It's all with us. But then it's also important to know that each character has one or two of these dominant. Like, like someone has a lot of kindness versus the other one that has really good leadership. We want to search in each character to see what is each character's dominant personality trait, including flaws. I just made a list, and we all have this too. Let's be honest with ourselves. We all feel arrogant at times. We can venge. We can be childish. We can be gossipy. We can be meek. We all have it, little or a lot. We can be abusive, or we can actually allow other people to be abusive to us. We have it all, but it's just like they say name it to tame it. So we want to use naming for these personality traits to communicate in the story that how it feels to be like that, and how it can hurt when someone is ignorant, how it can hurt other people and the character when someone is arrogant. We want to show that, but it's not, one character is not only arrogant or only childish. A character has all of it together. It's like some dominance. Like I mentioned, literary archetypes. So there are different lists of archetypes that we use in literature and in psychology. You can find a list of 400 archetypes or 12 or 8. But these are kind of like the way that we see a person's dominant character. However, I want to mention it again, that we all have it all. Like at points, I can be a very romantic person, helpful person. I can be a hero. Depends on all different roles that I have in life, sometimes we have a magical day and we can magically actually put everything together and get it done. But some people can do it a lot more and I can do it a lot less. We can be a rebel, an explorer, when you are talking about a travel that you did, or when you are talking about a childhood in the woods, you were an explorer, right? And then there is a sage. There is like a person. We have our own wisdom that we share with others. But then if you ask me, I immediately remember my older aunt, who was always very calm and patient, and you could go to her and ask her for an advice. It wasn't impulsive. So I could remember her as a sage. We all have innocence in us. We all can be creator, and creators are not just mechanical or software engineers. We all create in our lives. We have to find how we create a new structure in my daily life. A lot of different type of creations. One thing that I don't want to forget here is when you see a word creator, ruler, innocent, please question the definition, the conventional definition that you have for it. go post-conventional, expand the definition of an innocent person, a creator. What is it that we create? Go beyond what we have just defined as a creator. Some people are very good at ruling other people in a way, a little bit of like more leadership maybe. Some people are real good caregivers. They're always ready to help other people. I really like the everyman because, you know, the classic version of each one of us, the moment that I see my daughter after a while and I hug her, every mother has that moment, you know, those classic versions of us. I can't be a funny person most of the time. I think the only person that can laugh at my jokes is my husband. But I think we all have a little bit of humor in us. But some people, everybody knows a person in life that just uses humor in a good way or unpleasant way, to just move ahead, you know. So kind of like the dominant characteristics of a person. And this is like just a 12 archetypes in a list, but like I said, you can find all different lists up to 300-400. It's 3:03, so I understand if anybody needs to leave, and I apologize for going over. I want to suggest that if you are writing your own memoir, it doesn't hurt if you do at least one or both of these personality tests. The Myers-Briggs Test, a lot of people are more familiar with it, that, you know, like it shows us whether I'm introverted or extroverted, I'm sensing or intuition. Like I used to be extroverted, I'm more introverted now. I usually feel with my intuition now. In like my older age, I'm trying to actually develop my sensing. And then between thinking and feeling is kind of like which one is dominant. Like mine was always feeling, I'm trying to bring thinking. But overall, like I was INJF. Wait, where is the J? I think I missed something here. Let me look at it. If necessary, I will send a new version of the slides, but I missed something here, I think. Enneagram is about 9 personality types, like the perfectionist, the helper, the achiever, if I remember, the individual, the investigator, the loyalist, the leader, and also the negotiator. Again, I just want to make sure that, first of all, we are beyond our personalities. We want to know our personalities and our personality traits in order to develop ourselves. The good thing about Enneagram is when you take the test, you get to know yourself a little better. But also it allows you to see from 1 to 9 of unhealthy to healthy level of growth, where you are and how you can grow with having that personality trait. Let's say like I am personality type 2, helper. In an unhealthy way, I used to do people pleasing, flattering, and even manipulating. In a healthy level, when I grow, I want to actually help people for the sake of helping people, not having an agenda and not wanting to gain something about it. I just like to help people. So I have that. If I grow it, I can use it in a healthy way. If I don't grow it, then it just stays with me as an unhealthy characteristic.
Shabnam, Craig asked, do you recommend any websites to use for these assessments?
Yeah, these are links. These are links. This one, there are free ones, but I recommend this one. Is $12, I think. I recommend this one. It's a little bit more sophisticated, but this one is actually a good one too. So these are both links. Thank you. Okay. Okay, we get to emotional support. I also made a little card of this, and I have sent it to print. So if one day I come to the library, I bring a few of them. Anybody can grab it. But this is kind of like a little checklist. This whole, I liked it when Craig said it actually, thank you. This whole, every slide can be like a checklist for you. When you write down, then you can go back to it and see like, did I do this? Kind of like contemplating on it. And as far as emotional support, you want to check, you want to ask yourself, what is the emotion that I'm feeling right now? What was the trigger? Can I accept my emotion? I feel jealous, and yes, I am jealous. I'm accepting it. Where is the wound? How can I heal that wound instead of like, oh my God, I'm such a bad person, I'm jealous? No, jealousy has a message too. There is a wound inside us that creates jealousy. So we want to have that self-compassion. What are the tools that I can ground myself? Do I want to go for a run, for a walk? Do I want to lay down? Do I want to play music? Do I want to talk to someone safe? You know, how is it? How is it that I'm taking care of myself? This slide shows, the picture here shows, it's based on a very limited research, academic research, still developing. It shows like each emotion that you feel, how it shows up in the body. Please remember, it's a very limited, about 700 people, I think, research study, and they are still working on it. It's been a few years, but this could give you a little bit clue to when I feel anger, where do I feel it in my body? How does it impact my body? When I feel anger, it's on my shoulders and my neck and the shortness of breath. When I feel sad, I feel it in kind of like my tummy, like my gut and my chest. I feel a lack of energy. So see how you feel it in your body, where you feel, where you sense it in your body. This is just like, just to give you the concept, but it's still like a work in progress. I provided this little from imbright.org. I highly recommend her website, Amanda Blake. Her book is amazing on somatic awareness. Just to little check on yourself when you are writing. I think Catherine was saying that, like how intense our emotions can come up and our emotions impact our body. You can just kind of like do a body scan and see which part of your body is triggered. Jaw, you know, we don't even notice how tight our jaws are. And one thing I would add to this slide is underarm, because when I have anxiety, I definitely sweat a lot. So that's one sign, just to see what's going on in our body and how we can soothe ourselves, which I recommended. This is just a repeated slide from last time. Put your hand on that part of the body that you feel it's triggered. Close your eyes and just have a slow breathing. Allow yourself to calm down. Have that self-compassion for yourself. Writing our memoirs, even the best memories, it still brings emotions up. It's powerful emotions. Let them come up, but let them be processed, process them to heal them. And the most important thing, I want to make sure that you have someone safe to talk to. It's a co-regulation. When we talk to another person about our powerful emotions, we just allow another person to come to our boundaries and help us to calm down, to be grounded again. Any questions, any comments? If you had a chance, if you could write more and come back and share with us with your experience about the writing experience, the emotional experience part of it, that would be wonderful. Let me know if you have questions or anything. My information is here. Please email me. Larissa, I know I owe you the feedback. I'm sorry. Yeah, I will be happy to connect with everyone. And if you have any questions or comments, or discussions, these are my favorite topics to talk.
So Shabnam, should I hold off until you take a second look at your slides about the J and Myers-Briggs?
Yes, and
Okay.
that will be like just a few minutes. Yeah,
Sure. Yeah, no problem. Okay, yeah, well, thanks everybody for joining us. I recorded today's session as well. I am backed up on my work because I had to take some time off of work. So as soon as I have the link to the second session available, I'll send that out, and then the same with this one. And so hope to see you all on July 1st, our next session.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Shabnam. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Shabnam.
Thank you.
Thank you, Western Library.
Be well.